I thought this birthday would be different. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me as more than the person who pays all the bills. At 28 years old, I was still living in my childhood home in suburban Ohio, taking care of everyone while they treated me like furniture. The excitement I felt that morning while setting up my own birthday party should have been a warning. When you have to organize your own celebration and pay for everything yourself, that tells you something about your place in the family hierarchy. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button. Subscribe for more real stories about family drama that will make you question everything you thought you knew about unconditional love. Because what my father said at my birthday dinner changed my entire life forever. My family situation was more complicated than it looked from the outside. I lived with my father David, 55 years old, and unemployed for the past 3 years. My mother Linda worked part-time as a cashier, bringing in just enough to cover groceries. My younger brother Jake, 25, spent his days gaming in the basement instead of looking for work. Somehow, I had become the sole financial provider for our entire household. As a software developer, I earned a decent salary, but every penny seemed to disappear into family expenses. Since I turned 22 and got my first real job, I had been covering the mortgage, utilities, insurance, car payments, and basically everything else. What started as temporary help when Dad lost his job became a permanent arrangement that nobody questioned. They simply expected it, like expecting the sun to rise. The emotional dynamic was even more draining than the financial burden. I was always the responsible one, the reliable daughter, the one who had everything figured out. But beneath their praise was an underlying assumption that my life belonged to them. My achievements were celebrated only in terms of how they benefited the family. Got a promotion. Great, now we can afford cable again. Bonus at work. Perfect timing for Jake's car repair. For my 28th birthday, I decided to make an effort. Maybe if I showed them how much I cared, they would return that affection. I spent $150 on a custom cake from the bakery downtown, another $200 on food for 15 people, and decorated the dining room with balloons and streamers I bought myself. I invited our extended family, including my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, hoping for a real celebration. My secret hope was embarrassingly simple. I wanted them to surprise me with something, anything that showed they had thought about me independently. A homemade card, a small gift, even just a speech acknowledging what I meant to them. Last year, my birthday consisted of a store-bought cake and a chorus of half-hearted happy birthdays before everyone returned to their phones. The party started well enough. Everyone arrived on time, complimenting the decorations and diving into the food. Uncle Martin brought his famous potato salad. Aunt Sarah carried a bouquet of flowers from her garden, and my cousins seemed genuinely happy to see me. The house filled with laughter and conversation, exactly what I had envisioned. But as the evening progressed, a familiar pattern emerged. The conversation swirled around everyone else's lives. My cousin Emma's new job, Uncle Martin's fishing trips, Aunt Sarah's garden, my grandmother's book club. I moved between groups, refilling drinks and clearing plates invisible in my own celebration. Jake sat in the corner playing games on his phone, occasionally looking up to grab more food. Dad dominated one conversation with complaints about the job market, while Mom apologized to everyone for the house being messy, though I had cleaned it spotless. Standing in my own dining room surrounded by family, I felt profoundly alone. These people were eating my food, enjoying my hospitality, but none of them seemed particularly interested in me as a person. I was the hostess, the provider, the background character in their stories. When someone did address me directly, it was usually to ask where something was or to compliment the food I had purchased. As we gathered around the table for cake, I felt a flutter of nervous excitement. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the traditional birthday spotlight, where maybe someone would say something meaningful. I lit the candles myself while everyone sang happy birthday with varying levels of enthusiasm. The song ended, and I closed my eyes to make a wish before blowing out the flames. Uncle Martin, always one for commentary, broke the brief silence with his booming voice. "So, Tessa, another year older, still taking care of everyone, huh?" He chuckled and took a sip of his beer. "What would we do without our little provider here?" That is when my father, without any hesitation or thought, delivered the words that would change everything. "Well, if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would miss you. You are just there." The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then Uncle Martin let out a surprised laugh, the kind you make when someone says something shocking, but probably true. Aunt Sarah nodded slowly. "That is harsh, but kind of accurate." My cousin Emma looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Jake glanced up from his phone long enough to add, "Yeah, I mean, we would figure things out somehow." My mother, the one person I expected to defend me, simply smiled awkwardly and looked down at her plate. Not a single person at that table contradicted my father's statement. Not one voice rose to say he was wrong, that I mattered, that I would be missed. The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my face burned with humiliation, and I felt tears threatening to spill. 28 years of sacrificing my own dreams, my social life, my savings, my independence. And this was how they saw me, not as a daughter or sister, but as a convenient service provider who could be replaced if necessary. I managed to force a smile and mumble something about getting more napkins, using the excuse to escape to the kitchen. Standing alone by the sink, I stared out the window at our backyard and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Every memory of giving up plans with friends to stay home with sick family members, every sacrifice I had made, every time I had chosen their needs over my own wants, it all crystallized into a single devastating realization. They did not see me as a person with feelings, dreams, and worth. I was a resource to be used, reliable and unappreciated. The laughter continuing in the dining room confirmed that my father's cruel words had already been forgotten by everyone except me. In that moment, standing in the kitchen, I began calculating. The mortgage payment was $2,800 monthly. Utilities averaged $400. Groceries ran about $600. Car payments, insurance, and miscellaneous expenses brought my monthly contribution to the household up to $4,500 out of my $7,200 take-home pay. My savings account held $85,000, money I had been accumulating for a house down payment that never seemed to happen because family emergencies always took priority. For the first time, I realized that money could buy me freedom instead of just buying them comfort. Standing in that kitchen, listening to my family laugh and enjoy the party I had thrown and paid for, I made a decision that surprised even me. If I was truly forgettable, if my disappearance would not matter, then perhaps it was time to test that theory. The 2 weeks following my birthday were the most carefully planned 14 days of my life. I maintained my usual routine, going to work, paying bills, and acting like nothing had changed. But underneath, I was orchestrating my escape with military precision. My first step was researching my company's transfer policies. I discovered they had a growing office in Austin, Texas, and were actively recruiting experienced developers to relocate. I submitted my transfer request, citing personal reasons and emphasizing my willingness to start immediately. Within 3 days, I received approval and a start date just 1 month away. Apartment hunting in Austin became my secret evening activity. While my family watched television downstairs, I scoured rental websites and scheduled virtual tours. I found a perfect 1-bedroom apartment in a modern complex with amenities I had never enjoyed, like a pool and fitness center. The rent was $1,200, less than half what I was contributing to the family expenses. I opened a new bank account with a different institution, one that had no connection to my family's financial institution. Slowly, over the course of 10 days, I transferred most of my savings in amounts small enough to avoid triggering any alerts. I kept only enough in my original account to cover 1 final month of family bills. The logistics of moving required careful timing. My family had a predictable routine of grocery shopping every Saturday morning. a trip that usually took them 3 hours because they visited multiple stores to find the best deals. I arranged for a moving company to arrive at 8 in the morning on a Saturday, knowing they would be gone from 7:30 until at least 10:30. Canceling the automatic bill payments was perhaps the most satisfying part of my preparation. I called each company individually explaining that I would no longer be responsible for the accounts. The mortgage company transferred responsibility back to my father's name where it belonged. Utility companies, insurance providers, and credit card companies all received the same message from me. I practiced the conversation in my head dozens of times, but actually making those calls felt liberating. For 6 years, I had been financially responsible for adults who were perfectly capable of handling their own affairs. Returning that responsibility to them was like lifting a weight off my shoulders. The night before my departure, I packed my personal belongings into boxes, focusing only on items that truly belonged to me. Clothes, books, my laptop, personal documents, photographs, and a few sentimental items. Everything else, the furniture we had bought together, the appliances, the decorations I left behind. They were part of the life I was abandoning. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzle. My family left for their shopping expedition at exactly 7:30, just as they did every week. I watched from my bedroom window as Dad's car pulled out of the driveway, carrying away the 3 people who thought I was forgettable. The moving truck arrived 15 minutes early, and the crew worked with impressive efficiency. 6 years of my life fit into the back of their truck with room to spare. By 10:15, every trace of my presence had been loaded and driven away. I performed one final walk through the house, making sure I had not forgotten anything important. In the kitchen on the counter where everyone would see it immediately, I left a single sheet of paper with a brief message written in my neatest handwriting. You said no one would miss me if I disappeared. Let's test that theory. All bills are now your responsibility. Good luck, Tessa. I locked the front door, slid my house key through the mail slot, and walked to my car without looking back. The 14-hour drive to Austin stretched ahead of me like a bridge to a completely different life. As I merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom, asking if I needed anything from the store. I turned the phone off without responding and drove south toward Texas with my radio playing songs I had forgotten I loved. My first week in Austin passed in a blur of new experiences and unexpected emotions. I checked into an Airbnb near my new apartment and began working remotely while waiting for my lease to begin. The freedom was intoxicating, but also terrifying. For the first time in 6 years, every decision I made was purely for myself. The guilt hit me hardest in the evenings. I would find myself reaching for my phone to check if Dad needed help with something or if Jake had eaten dinner. Then I remembered that they had made it clear my presence was unnecessary, and I would put the phone down again. By Wednesday, the silence from my family became overwhelming. My phone showed 47 missed calls, all from different family members. The text messages started polite but grew increasingly frantic. Dad's first message read, "Tessa, very funny joke. Come home now." By Thursday, his messages had escalated to, "This is not a game. We need to talk immediately." Mom's messages were more emotional. "Honey, please call me back. We are worried sick. Whatever we did wrong, we can fix it." Jake's messages were the most telling. "Tessa, the mortgage payment bounced. How do I fix this? Call me back right now." I made the decision to block all their numbers temporarily. I needed time to clear my head without the constant bombardment of their panic. For 1 month, I wanted to experience life without their voices in my ear telling me what they needed from me. The contrast between their current desperation and their casual cruelty at my birthday was not lost on me. When they thought I was permanently available, my feelings did not matter. Now that I was gone, suddenly, I was essential. My new routine in Austin began to take shape. I worked from a coffee shop near my temporary housing, explored the city during lunch breaks, and spent evenings reading books I had bought but never had time to enjoy. The simple pleasure of choosing how to spend my time without considering anyone else's needs was revelatory. After 3 weeks, I moved into my permanent apartment. The space was entirely mine decorated, according to my taste, furnished with items I chose because I liked them rather than because they were practical for a household of 4 adults. For the first time since college, I felt like I was living in a home rather than just a place where I slept between work shifts. The loneliness was real, but it was different from the loneliness I had felt surrounded by family. This loneliness came from starting over, but it carried hope for better connections. The loneliness back home came from being invisible to the people who should have loved me most. My work performance improved dramatically without the constant stress of family financial management. I completed projects ahead of schedule, volunteered for challenging assignments, and even socialized with coworkers after hours. My supervisor noticed the change and hinted at advancement opportunities that excited me for the first time in years. 1 month after my disappearance, I unblocked my family's phone numbers. The flood of messages that came through painted a picture of escalating chaos back home. Dad had been forced to find employment and was working at a warehouse for minimum wage. Mom had increased her hours to full-time and was exhausted. Jake had actually gotten a job at a fast food restaurant and was complaining bitterly about the work. But mixed with the complaints and demands for my return were messages I had never received before. Apologies. Acknowledgements of my contributions. Admissions that they had taken me for granted. Dad's message from 2 weeks prior read, "I was wrong about what I said at your birthday. We need you. Please come back." Mom wrote, "We never realized how much you did for us. The house feels empty without you. Please forgive us." Even Jake had sent a surprising message. "I am working now. I understand what you went through. I am sorry we never appreciated you." Saul, reading their messages, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. They did miss me, but only because my absence created problems for them. Their apologies focused on what they lost rather than how they had hurt me. 3 months into my Austin adventure, I was thriving in ways I had never imagined possible. My apartment had become a sanctuary filled with plants, books, and artwork that reflected my personality rather than family compromises. I had joined a hiking group, taken up yoga, and even started dating casually for the first time in years. The most significant change was internal. Without the constant pressure of managing everyone else's needs, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried under responsibility. I remembered that I enjoyed cooking for pleasure rather than obligation, that I loved reading mystery novels, and that I was actually quite funny when I was not stressed about money. Work continued to go exceptionally well. My supervisor offered me a promotion with a substantial raise, recognizing the leadership qualities and dedication I brought to the team. The irony was not lost on me that removing myself from my family's financial demands had actually improved my earning potential. I started therapy to process the years of emotional manipulation I had endured. My therapist helped me recognize patterns of codependency and taught me strategies for setting healthy boundaries. Understanding that my worth was not determined by what I could provide for others was a revelation that changed how I viewed every relationship. Romance entered my life in the form of Marcus, a 32-year-old environmental engineer I met at a coffee shop near my apartment. What struck me most about Marcus was how he respected my independence and encouraged my goals rather than seeing me as a resource to be utilized. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than need and obligation. 6 months after my disappearance, I agreed to a phone call with my family. The conversation was tense, but productive. I established clear conditions for any future relationship with them. I would not be returning home. I would not resume financial support. And any relationship we rebuilt would be based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. Family therapy sessions conducted over video call became a weekly requirement. Slowly, painfully, we began to address the dysfunctional dynamics that had defined our relationships for years. Dad got help for his depression, and took responsibility for his long unemployment. Mom began asserting herself more and stopped enabling Jake's laziness. Jake, faced with real consequences, for the first time actually began maturing. The process was not easy for any of us. There were setbacks, arguments, and moments when I questioned whether the relationships were worth salvaging. But gradually, something new began to emerge. Conversations that focused on my life and interests rather than just family problems. Expressions of pride in my accomplishments that were not connected to financial benefits. Genuine concern for my happiness rather than just my availability. A year later, I returned to Ohio for a brief visit. The house looked different, smaller somehow. Dad was working steadily and had lost weight from the physical labor. Mom seemed more confident and was considering returning to school. Jake had been promoted to assistant manager at his restaurant and was saving money for his own apartment. They had learned to function without me, just as I had learned to function without them. The difference was that I had thrived in independence, while they had merely survived it. My father pulled me aside during that visit to offer a private apology. "I cannot take back what I said at your birthday," he admitted, "but I can tell you that you were wrong about one thing. We do miss you, every single day. I just wish it had not taken losing you to realize how much you meant to us." His words meant more than any financial contribution I had ever made to the family. For the first time, I felt seen as a person rather than a provider. The lesson I learned from disappearing was profound and life-changing. Your worth as a human being is not measured by what you can provide for others, but by how you value and respect yourself. Sometimes the people who claim you will not be missed are the ones who need you the most. But by the time they realize it, you might have discovered that you do not need them anymore. I had spent 6 years of my adult life believing that love was earned through sacrifice and service. I learned that real love exists independent of utility. The people who truly care about you will miss your presence, not just your contributions. My story is not about revenge or punishment, though I will admit those feelings were present initially. It is about the courage to walk away from relationships that diminish you and the strength to rebuild your life around your own worth rather than others' needs. Sometimes disappearing is the only way to discover who you really are when you are not busy being who everyone else needs you to be. The best thing I ever did was vanish completely because when I came back, I returned as someone who knew her value and would never accept less than she deserved. Today, I live a life that reflects my choices rather than my obligations. I have relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. I have learned that being needed and being loved are not the same thing, and that the difference matters more than I ever imagined. The people who said I would not be missed were wrong, but they were also right in ways they did not intend. They did not miss the person I actually was because they had never really seen her. They missed the service I provided, the problems I solved, and the responsibilities I carried. When I disappeared, I took away their convenience, not their daughter or sister. But here is what they could not have predicted. In learning to live without me, they became better people. In learning to live without them, I became the person I was always meant to be. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to prove they can survive without you. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to find out who you are when no one else is watching. What would happen if you disappeared tomorrow? Would people miss you for who you are or for what you do for them? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life, taken for granted by the people who should value you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Because your story matters, and someone needs to hear it. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life experiences that remind us all to value ourselves, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are worth more than what they provide. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. Your worth is not negotiable, and you deserve relationships that celebrate who you are, not just what you can do for others.